welcome to Beyond the Front Page, a show brought to you by Cayuga Community College for the spring 2021 semester here at the college. This is a show that's broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios. It is put on by the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. As you know, over the last several years, we've put the issues of public safety and personal health as a priority for having discussions on Beyond the Front Page. And while this area and region has been dealing with the issue of COVID-19 and responding very well to things such as testing and social distancing and vaccinations, many have seen upticks in other areas of public health that we should be talking about. And last week we talked a little bit about drug overdoses and their spike because of COVID-19. And while we suspect it is unrelated, but we'll talk about it, there has been an increase in cases of domestic violence reported, especially in the last several months. This rise has been through what has been reported locally and regionally, as well as seeing what is going on throughout the world because people are becoming more isolated. Those calls have increased, and we want to talk about not only those calls, but the services that are available. So we've asked Cayuga County and Cayuga Seneca Community Action Agency's Director of Family and Victim Services, Frank Barwinczak, to discuss this local spike and the services of their agency over the next half hour. And you'll see from time to time popping up on the screen the number 255-6221. That is the number for emergency services for CAP if you have a domestic violence issue, and I believe other services as well.
Correct.
But welcome.
Well, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming here. This is not an easy subject for people to talk about, but I think how you and I started this conversation, there was a story at the end of January in the Citizen about a spike in numbers, and your executive director, Lori Piccolo, said, you'll come on and talk about that, and so we appreciate that. She's been on in the past. But in general, you have seen an increase in the number of calls that you've received, correct?
Yes, I mean our hotline calls are up. Our service numbers are up for people that have reached out to us for services related to domestic violence.
And has there been a surge in the last 2 or 3 months?
Since COVID started in last March, March of 2020, obviously, we've seen it's kind of like an up and down, where when the economy and the community started opening up, when the COVID levels were down, we would see an increase in calls and contacts from victims. And then when the economy kind of closed back down because we had an uptick in cases, we saw less calls.
So like holiday times.
Correct.
And would that be because people are isolated, or because they may be housed with the person who's abusing them or causing the violence?
Our belief is, and you hit the nail on the head, when they're closed off with their significant other, even their children, they don't have the ability to make contact with us to seek services. So when everything's closed down and people aren't working because they're home because of the COVID, the victims can't reach out because they're with their abuser. They're kind of isolated, as you said. They can't reach out to us for services. As things opened up and abusers went back to work and stores opened up, restaurants opened up, the victims were able to then reach out to us for services because they had that time, that opportunity. And
so you were nice enough to talk to me beforehand, just in 3 kind of incidents, not necessarily negative incidents stood out, but you had said that, for example, it was easier for a victim who might regularly go out to do their laundry at a laundromat might be able to call.
Right. That amongst many other, errands they may have to run to the bank or to the post office or wherever. They're able to leave their where they reside, and then they can make contact to us to seek services. As before, when they couldn't go out or couldn't, leave where they were, they're kind of trapped. So they couldn't, if there are abusers there, they can't reach out to us and seek services.
So another hindrance is many, you wouldn't know by the number of car registrations in Cayuga County, but in some cases you have one vehicle homes.
Exactly.
And so, I'm looking at it from the demographic point of view. Sometimes somebody can't get out of the house and say, I just need to take the car to go down to the corner, or if they're traveling together.
Right, exactly. If they don't have a mode of transportation, that's a big hindrance for victims to be able to seek, services from us.
So you serve both Cayuga and Seneca County, largely rural areas, and while we think of Auburn and that in the I don't want to call it metro because we're not I know you live for several decades in Washington. We're a little different, but we're more metropolitan than or suburban than the rest of the county.
Right.
How does transportation, Central only goes so far. There's not that type of public transportation in Seneca County, but you have limits on hours even in the city of Auburn. How does that impact the services that might be provided to a victim?
Well, first of all, we do service Seneca County and some of our programs, not for domestic violence.
Okay.
Seneca County has their own programs and departments that handle domestic violence. But we do service for domestic violence all of Cayuga County. And being in a rural area has been a big problem for victims because, like you stated, there's no bus for them to come into town to meet with us. So what we've tried to do over the last couple of years since I've been involved in the program is we can, if they could reach out to us, at least get to us and let us know, we could meet them out in the county. We can meet them out in rural areas, meet them we have different partnerships with churches and different venues.
Well, you mentioned the
that we
Moravia
could meet 'em.
Library.
Yeah,
might need a library or something like that.
Just as an example, yeah. So there's all different avenues we can go down to try to meet with the victim if they can't make it into the city of Auburn down to our location on York Street.
So when we were coming down here, you had said that you'd been 2.5 decades in law enforcement.
Yes, 25 years in Washington, D.C.
So you ended up here because, as we kindly say, we're the center of the universe. You
Right.
grew up in Auburn.
I did
You're an
grow up
Auburn
in
High School grad. How did you get into, you've been doing this particular job for a little over 2 years, correct?
Correct. When I retired almost 9 years ago now, I moved back to Auburn and I started working at the agency, but I was working with the, at that time we had a grant, the Safe Haven Visitation and Exchange Center. And what that was, that's what parents, they couldn't get along, so they needed a place to exchange their children, or parents that couldn't be alone with the children, they would have supervised visitation. So I worked with that. We had that program for almost 5 years, and then the grant ended, and of course, you have to reapply for grants, et cetera. So there was a break in that grant. So in the interim, I figure I'd throw my hat in the ring for the domestic violence program itself, and fortunately, I took over this position about 2.5 years ago.
And just on the safe haven issue, some people may not know this, but sometimes transferring custody between divorced parents or in the process of getting divorced can be a very unpleasant operation.
Oh, absolutely. And before the center opened up, I mean, they were doing exchanges in Wegmans parking lot, where there were cameras, or at Auburn Police Department. So it took by us having it, we had it set up where it was safe for the parent that had custody or didn't have custody, that was the victim of domestic violence. But I'm also pleased to say that we were re-awarded that grant last October, and we're in the process of reopening up the center again, and I'm hoping to have that up and running this summer or by fall the latest is my goal, and that will be another 3 years of
and that'll fall under your purview.
And that will fall under the domestic violence program as well.
So going back to this issue, we're about a year now, well, we are just a year about at this point of lockdown with COVID. So did you see a dip when everybody, schools shut down, pretty much restaurants shut down, everyone shut down? Did you see a dip in the number of calls?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly how the trend went. When we were on lockdown, we saw a decrease in calls, and when we were opening up, we saw an increase in calls.
And holidays have been seen the dip, but otherwise, so we're now at a stage where hopefully everybody's wearing their mask.
Right.
People are getting vaccinated. Your calls are up.
Right. Oh, yeah. Since January, after during the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday season, we saw a dip in calls. And then as January and mid-January started to come, these last 2 months, we've just been, I hate to say it, but the phone's been ringing off the hook from victims, which is good. I mean, It's glad that there is, glad that we can assist them, but on the flip side, it's bad that there's that many victims needing services.
So, and I don't want to get into legal definitions because I don't think that's helpful, but For you and your staff, what do you consider the range of domestic violence? Is it physical? Is it verbal? What's it range from?
Well, verbal abuse, mental abuse, and physical abuse. I would, to put percentages on, most of our victims, when we speak to them and we interview them and try to figure out what the best plan of action is for them, it always started verbal abuse first, mental abuse, that power and control.
So define what mental abuse is.
Mental abuse, it's all under power and control. Okay. Like the abuser is the only one that has access to the bank account. The victim doesn't. So she knows he or she, whoever the victim may be, knows, okay, I can't escape. I don't have the means to escape. I don't have the funds.
And financial constraints is a big issue.
Big time. And I mean, think about it. I mean, we're seeing it now in the country. You're wondering, are you going to get another paycheck or not? I mean, that is mental. I mean, it's going to affect your mental stability. And not only that, the abusers have a way of putting people down to make their victim feel less equal to them or less equal to society. And that's a mental abuse. On top of that, then you have the verbal abuse, the language, the constantly, telling someone they're useless, overweight, ugly. I mean, just different words of that. And then, unfortunately, it escalates into physical abuse. And that's what we see. It starts, because most of the victims we interview that it's reached the stage of physical abuse, it started with mental and verbal, and it escalated up over a period of time.
I know you were trying to be diplomatic. You had mentioned he or she. So most of your cases are men abusing women, but you do have occasionally the other way around.
Yeah, I believe the breakdown is 1 out of every 4 victims is a male. Right around 25%, maybe 20%, 1 out of 5. I'd have to look at it. I remember just talking about this not too long ago. But it's a larger percentage than people think that you have male victims.
Yeah, because I would have thought it would be in the 5-6%. You're talking almost
a little higher than that. I want to say 1 out of 8, maybe.
So in dealing with this, where do children fall into this issue?
Well, it's unfortunate because the children, they view and see the domestic violence. And unfortunately, a lot of victims that we interview said, well, when I was a little girl or a little boy, I saw my mom or dad abuse the other, parent. So not only is it, affects them as children to see their parents split up. Why am I living with mommy and not daddy? Why am I living with daddy and not mommy? Why do I have to go to the center to see my other parent that I don't live with? So for them, it's got to be a big mental, hard on them.
But if they're abused, it's a whole different category.
Yeah. So
it'd be child and family services.
Yes, we would refer when children are abused. There's different programs we could refer them to, like Cayuga Counseling Services has advocates over there that deal better with children advocacy, child protective services. We work side by side with Cayuga County Child Protective Services. So a lot of times when they go out on a call and they see there's domestic violence involved, they contact us, and then we'll assign an advocate to that case as well to kind of mirror with Child Protective Services to make sure they're getting all the what they need, the different programs that we could sign them up for or whatever help we can provide for them.
So at this particular stage, as we're creeping towards Easter, what type of is there any anomalies out there that you're seeing of types of cases, or is it because victims have been so cooped up that it's skyrocketing from verbal and mental that we've really gotten to the physical level, that there's just a jump in that?
Right. I'm sure by with the society being closed down and them being cooped up, there's probably more domestic violence that might not have occurred if, parent A is going to work every day and parent B is going about their way.
There's that release.
There's that release. But now that they're cooped up, I think that had a big impact on the increase of domestic violence that may not have ever occurred if it wasn't due to that.
So numbers-wise, what are you up?
I would say probably from 2019 to 2020, we were probably up at least 25-30% more than calls we handled, more than the year before. So it may not sound like a huge increase, but when you're talking numbers where you're getting, for the whole year, like for instance for 2019, 20, we had 623 hotline calls. That's 623 calls, people seeking assistance to our hotline number. The year before, it may have only, I want to say, I think it was high 400s. So that's a pretty big jump.
And you're on track now to even go higher than that.
Yeah, this year I think we're going to exceed the numbers. Other services, individuals served, we've seen an increase. Just different.
So you and your organization also provide some form of, or work with others who provide shelter services, correct on that?
Well, we're the the agency that handles all the sheltering services for Cayuga County. However, a lot of times we reach outside of county. Like there's cases where, okay, you're just not going to be safe in Cayuga County, so we reach out to, we have neighboring jurisdictions that we all work together with, because a lot of times I may be sheltering someone from out Onondaga County because it wasn't safe for them to be there, and vice versa. So we reach out to all other different counties if need be.
Yeah, so where I'm going with this though is your bed nights, and I know that's a horrible way to report it as, because it's individuals, and sometimes it's parent moms or dads with children. Your number of bed nights is dramatically up as well.
Absolutely. Last year we were up over to 2,700 bed nights for the year. We provided for victims. The year before, I think we were much lower than that, closer to 2,000. So you're talking another 700 bed nights that we provided.
So translate that into individuals.
Well, individuals,
how long does somebody stay with you on average?
Well, it varies. I mean, we'll have victims stay with us 2-3 nights, and then they're able to, they find a family member, a cousin, a relative, a friend that then they can go stay with. And then we've had victims can stay with us. We can shelter someone up to 90 days and then get an extension for another 90 days. So that's 180 days, so half a year. To give a percentage of how long they stay, it really does vary. It's a case-by-case basis.
But your overall number was what again for the year?
The bed nights, 1,190. I think, almost 1,200 bed nights for the year.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Right.
I guess I have to ask this question. You said sometimes they stay 2 or 3 nights and they find a family member who will take them in. How often do they go back to their abuser?
Unfortunately, a large percentage of the time.
And do you see them reoccurring, coming back?
Yes, we have several victims that will come back to us monthly, a couple, 2-3 times a year. Some I've even seen some victims. It's like I don't have the means. That's why when we take on a client and a victim, we don't only just try to shelter them temporarily. We want to try to work with them to help them build their life back. We have all kinds of programs to help them get housing on their own, help them find employment on their own. If they need help, managing their money, their finances. We have all these different programs. So the whole goal is to make them self-sustainable so they can provide for themselves and they don't have to go back to their abuser. The people that go back to the abusers because they realize, well, I just can't do it on my own. And it's unfortunate, it's a cycle. So we'll see them, 2, 3, 4 times a year, and it's like, you almost want to say, come on.
But they have to get to that point.
Yes, they have to get to that breaking point where it's just not right for me to go back. I need to, make it on my own. And like I said, we have all kinds of programs. We have different advocates and different programs. We work with them, with the county, try to get them housing assistance if they need, SNAP benefits or whatever benefits they can get from the county. We do all that paperwork with them to help them, facilitate to be able to achieve it and get those substances and from the county.
So not necessarily for Cayuga Seneca, but if you had the numbers, that would be great. But regionally, statewide, nationally, how many do return? Do you have any idea how many return to their abuser?
Not at the top of my head. I'd hate to throw a number out there and be.
But is it a large number?
Yeah, I would say a larger percentage return to their abuser than don't. Yes.
So Cayuga Seneca, which has been in operation for decades,
Yep.
is a full-service agency, and but let's talk about the ones that are focused on domestic violence. So you provide a number of what I would classify as emergency services.
Yes. So before I start there, Cayuga Seneca was our name. We actually rebranded a year and a half ago. Because we went back to, we're community action programs now. Okay. Everybody knows us as Cayuga Seneca. And
I've mostly gone through 4 changes since Gloria Griffin. So
exactly. But we are community action programs. So just if you can remember CAP's the best way. Not to correct you or anything.
No, it's fine. No, I've seen it. I like the new logo, by the way.
Yes,
but I'm like, do I put Cayuga in there? Do I put Seneca?
Right.
No. And I think there have been these rebrandings over the last most likely 30 years.
Right.
So,
But yes, our emergency and services, we can, well, obviously we have the 24-hour hotline. People can call in on that.
so let me stop on that. So we were popping up this number.
Yes.
Somebody can call there. Who are they calling?
So when you call our hotline, we work with a company in answering service. You're calling and saying, I would like to speak with a domestic violence advocate.
Or you're just saying,
Or just say, I'm in trouble. And if they say they're in trouble, the answering service will say, is it immediate trouble? If so, please hang up and dial 911, because if they need immediate attention. This hotline's not for if you're being beat, please dial 911,
Right.
not our service.
Don't have us call
Right.
that 911
No.
for you.
If
Okay.
you're seeking services for us to help, you call, they will patch you through to an advocate, 24 hours a day,
there's no
365 days
shutdown
a
on
year.
this.
We're not shut, we have a.
Okay.
Yep, and so, once again, that number you see, 315-255-6221. And we even get calls from family members. A lady will call and say, I know my sister's a victim of domestic violence. How can I proceed to convince her to call you, and things like that. Our advocate will talk with that family member and give them advice on how to convince that victim to call us. So even if you know of a victim, please reach out to us and let us know, and then we can hopefully guide you to help them to call us, so we can get them services. So that's the first emergency service we do
Okay.
provide. We also do sheltering and housing of them. So if someone needs immediate sheltering because they've fled their abuser, we can put them up.
So how many beds? You can't give the location. We wouldn't want you to.
No.
But I remember when the first, which is no longer, the first domestic shelter was created here in Cayuga County, going back to the Gloria Griffin days. This is almost 3 decades ago. How many different shelters or places can you shelter people in? Is it geographic to just Auburn, or do you house them everywhere?
The way I'm going to answer that is I'm going to leave it as simple as I can shelter multiple people from Cayuga County and from,
So you're not
and from out of county as
So
well.
where I'm going with
Yes.
this is, you're not limited to 2 beds.
No. I have access to multiple places, and I'm going to leave it at that, because
Okay.
obviously we like to keep it
You want to keep it
undisclosed,
secure.
okay, right.
Okay.
And that's not only for Cayuga County residents, City of Auburn residents, but also, like I said earlier, we get a lot of calls from out of county residents. Vice versa, we
And they're just these
reach out as well.
reciprocal agreements?
Yes, within
Okay.
within New York State, right.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't,
Nope,
but
nope,
you're
not-
talking about the beds. And I
Yep,
wanted to-
not a problem. Other emergency service we provide, we do police standbys with the local police or state police or county sheriff's department. We have a good working relationship with all three. So if, say, a victim's fleeing and they need to go and retrieve their items, an advocate will go with the victim, but we'll have a police standby,
Okay.
basically like an escort, to make sure nothing escalates. We help victims with, orders of protection, which are huge, because that's really the only tool in their toolbox to start with right away. If they need to have their abuser stay away, we'll go right with them to court and help them file the paperwork for orders of protection, custody orders, petition orders,
Now, are these
family
all
petition
free
orders.
services?
Yes, absolutely, all free.
So you also do a lot of advocacy work.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about
Yep.
that?
So when we have a court advocate that would accompany victims to court with them. We have education and safety planning advocates that deal with just safety planning and how to teach them to move forward, to know your whereabouts, know where you are, know your moves and things of that nature. It all goes to safety planning. We could provide cameras. We could provide all different things to victims, that may need that. Support groups. We have a support group where victims can come and talk, or we're starting up another one virtually as well here in the next few weeks, where they can reach out and participate in support groups.
Is a support group usually when they're outside of the home by that time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because it would be hard for them to.
Right, that's right.
When they're with their abuser.
Well,
Yeah,
because
it's
I can see
after-
you going out.
Yes, it's after they've already successfully fled, and now they need that support from others. How to move forward in their life and move ahead and put that behind them. We do case management with them, which includes trying to teach them, okay, this is your budget, this is how much money you have, because a lot of people come, they don't know because their abuser has
Had
controlled
control.
all that. So
let's talk a little bit about geography, because this is interesting to me just from the perspective of a long, narrow county, And sometimes, like you've said, you can set up a meeting, whether it's at a library or a church or wherever. What's the biggest challenge you face with a county that does not have a lot of public transportation, that has a lot of brown spots when it comes to not having internet access, from a service provider perspective?
Absolutely, and that's one of the downfalls of Cayuga County right now. They should really need to build up their infrastructure for people in these rural areas to have the Wi-Fi hotspots, because we'll finally be able to hook up with a victim, and she'd be like, it's been a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I've had no access to be able to call you because, my abuser controls the cell phone. I couldn't get away, or whatever it may be, and finally they're able to get to that location where they can make a phone call. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge we're trying to correct. Obviously, we can't do the Wi-Fi and all that the county needs to.
So your cases might be, because I saw from the January story that I quoted your executive director on, obviously the numbers in the city of Auburn are up because people may have access.
Right.
They're not as isolated.
Right.
And the sheriff's numbers may be low, but they're still very high.
Right.
How big an issue is just that issue of isolation here? When it comes to, when you provide your services, I'm assuming the bulk are in the city and the donut towns around Auburn.
Yeah, I would say the bulk are.
Because people have access.
They have access. I don't know how those victims are feeling, but isolation is a good word to describe it. That they feel all alone, they feel isolated because they don't have that access. They can't reach out to us. They can't get the services that they need.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on.
And I don't know the answer because, it's a challenge that.
And I'm not picking on Summerhill or Fairhaven.
Right.
Those happen to be the opposite
The
end.
opposite ends, yep.
But there is a lot of areas where we don't have, and we've had conversations about transportation here
Right.
on a regular basis, but that becomes a challenge for your agency.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
How big a staff do you have working on this?
In our domestic violence program,
Yes.
it's a staff of 7, and then my coordinator and myself.
And they're doing everything
Strictly domestic violence.
strictly that. You mentioned family members. You mentioned family members who may want to take part in getting services. How should they contact you if they don't call the number?
If they don't want to call the hotline number, they can call our agency, our main number at 315-255-1703, and just ask for a domestic violence advocate. And our receptionist will transfer them over to a domestic violence advocate. And that, of course, is work hours Monday to Friday, that number. 9
and
to
all
5.
of this is confidential.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So I want to end with you making the pitch. Maybe there's a victim out there or a family member of a victim. Tell that camera why they need to come and call that number that's on the screen.
The bottom line is people need help. If you know something's going on, please report it. Please call us. If you're a victim, please reach out. We have multiple services we can help you. The number's 315-255-6221. Let us try to help you. Let us get you in a better situation in your life so you can move forward. And like I said, if you're a family member or a friend and you know what's going on, someone else is being a victim of domestic violence, all it takes is a phone call. Please reach out to us, and we'll try to provide all the assistance we can to assist that victim.
I want to thank you. That's not an easy call for people to make.
No, I'm sure it's not.
So we do want to thank Mr. Barwinczak, who is the CAP
Very good.
Director of Family and Victim Services, and thank Ms. Piccolo as well for joining us to talk about this subject. We'd love to have you come back on to talk about updates and things that your agency is doing because it's important in our community. We want to thank you for your time over the last half hour.
Great, absolutely, and thank you for having us, and let's spread the word to end domestic violence.
And we need to, and I think that is one of the items for this month on top of everything, is domestic violence.
Awareness Month is October.
October.
Yeah, that's when
So-
you see the city all lit up.
All lit up.
Yeah.
So we do want to remind you that if you want to help somebody or you need help, we do suggest you contact 315-255-6221. That is a confidential number, and we encourage you to make that outreach. We'll be back next Tuesday in our studio with 2 rare back-to-back Beyond the Front Pages. The first one will be with Bob Oman, who is with the group bringing a new version of the Auburn Double Days back to Falcon Park this summer. And then that'll be followed by David Pappert of the Operation Gratitude, who is putting on a flag program at Hoops Park this summer, Memorial Day weekend, with the healing fields that we mentioned the other night with City Manager Jeff Diger. On Thursday, the 1st, we will have New York State Assemblyman John Lamondes for an Albany update. That is the date that the new budget is supposed to be updated or approved, so we'll hopefully have something fresh off the news for you about what's in that budget for Auburn and Cayuga County, as well as Onondaga and Seneca. We'll be back at the first in 2 weeks with Jeff Parazola, the Superintendent of Schools for the Auburn District. He'll give us a budget update. By that time, the state budget will have been approved. And then at the end of the month, we'll be having our annual forum with the Auburn Enlarged School District candidates. That is going to be the first time we're going to try it as a Zoom forum. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know that you can send us your questions or thoughts for guests to Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page. You can send them by email at cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. I want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night, a great tomorrow. Be safe out there, and we'll see you back in the studio next Tuesday.